In this lesson, we're going to take a look at adding a new transaction here on the Account Transactions tab. One of the most common reasons I've found for adding transactions here is because there are a couple of missing transactions from the Bank Statements tab. Some they didn't bring in properly through a bank feed, or maybe you missed importing a couple transactions or something was incorrect. In order to add a new transaction, you can click the New Transaction button. The first thing that you want to do is make sure that you've got the right transaction type that you're creating. So whether you're creating a spend money transaction in Xero or receive money transaction, so in other words, an expense or a deposit. Once you have that selected, go ahead and enter in the contact. So if, let's say we have Wilson periodicals, we'll just leave the date as is. You can enter a reference if required. Any item numbers related to inventory, which we'll touch on later. Descriptions, let's say this is a marketing expense for $500 and we want to code that to advertising. We'll ignore region for now. We'll touch on the tracking categories in Xero at a later time. Now we have the option to add additional line items to code within Xero. In this case, let's just leave it as a single line item. And then we won't be touching on expenses until a later time as well. This is part of the established edition of Xero. So let's just save that transaction. And if you scroll down below, you'll see that we have an unreconciled transaction for Wilson periodicals. This is the transaction we just created. So what do you do from here? How do you reconcile it? Because this transaction will not appear on your bank statement tab. So you can't go over there to your reconcile tab and match this against anything. If you've determined that this is a legitimate transaction, then there are a couple of ways that you can reconcile this transaction. The first and most manual way is to go through and click on this transaction itself, and then up on the top right-hand corner under Options, click Mark as Reconciled. So it tells you this is only recommended for you to mark this as reconciled manually in cases where the original bank transaction data was not able to be imported from the bank. So best practice, if you can import the data through the bank feed or through the CSV, this just leaves a better trail so that others are able to easily follow what you did in the system. But sometimes this is necessary, so we're just going to mark this as reconciled. Now, if I go back to the checking account on the Account Transactions tab, it would be incredibly manual to mark each and every one of these unreconciled transactions as reconciled by clicking into the transaction, going to the options, and then marking as reconciled. So I'll break this out into another video as well for easy access. There's a little known secret here on the top right-hand corner under the help icon. If you go down to the bottom, you'll see enable mark as reconciled. Make sure you toggle this on. This is going to refresh your screen. And now where you didn't see before, you have a more drop down. So when I select, let's say I want to go ahead and select all three of these transactions to be marked as reconciled, I can now click more and then mark as reconciled in bulk from this screen. So again, I'll create another video separately from this just to highlight this again. But you also see here too that the bank transaction source has been noted as created by a user manually. So sometimes this might throw off your bank reconciliation, but I like that it's called out here just so that we know this was a user-generated transaction as opposed to something that automatically came through the bank feed.